Pull up, grab the fuel nozzle, and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of the Truck Stops Here, brought to you by NATSO. Now, here's your host, Amy Toner.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Truck Stops Here. I'm your host, Amy Toner, and I'm here with my special co-host, Miss Ginger Laidlaw. Hey, Ginger.
Hey, Amy.
Hi, Ginger is the Vice President of NATSO's Alternative Fuels Council. We always make sure to draw her into these conversations about alternative fuels because she has a lot of insight into this market. You are listening to the Truck Stops Here, NATSO's podcast. NATSO is the National Trade Association for Truck Stops and Travel Centers, and our mission is to advance the success of truck stops and travel centers, and this podcast is just one of the many ways that we do that. Today we have a guest, always special. Our guest is Joe Annotti. He's Senior Vice President and Partner with Gladstein, Neandross and Associates, or GNA. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Amy. How are you?
I have a lot of questions for you this morning about NEVI, but before we do that, can you just tell us a bit about GNA?
Sure. Gladstein, Neandross and Associates is coming up on a 30 years of work in the clean transportation industry. We're headquartered in Santa Monica, but have staff throughout the U.S. And partnership opportunities really focused on driving innovation within the clean transportation space, whether that be from clean fuel production to clean fuel use, applications along the infrastructure, and newer technologies, specific to like electricity and hydrogen. We're very much active in the identification of new opportunities, and then looking out and finding the funding to help those opportunities. And part of that is telling a broader story. So not only we have a traditional consulting team, but we also have an events team that's responsible for ACT Expo, which is an annual trade show in Southern California each year, as well as a robust technical team that supports the rest of our group with site specifications and technology work. So it's we're a smaller group, 85 of us, but we're very nimble, and we're excited to be kind of at a really monumental time. I mean, we've seen so much activity over the past 6 months, and our topic for discussion today is just a part of that. So it's really, really exciting.
Absolutely. So GNA has been partnering with us the last 6 months or so, maybe a bit longer. Time is moving fast, but we did a podcast, we had you at the show, and as soon as I saw that some of the states' plans had been accepted, I thought we had to get you on the horn and talk to you about it.
35 of them. That's the kind of latest and greatest. So, I mean, as of last week, the Federal Highway Administration issued 35 approval letters.
Okay.
They are planning to issue the rest by the end of the month. So, about in 4 days to have everything wrapped up. And it is an incredible wealth of information going through individual state plans, looking at the timing and financial implications, how they're developing their partnership approaches. I mean, all of that is very much detailed inside of these plans.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that. So we're recording this on September 26th, and it'll come out next week. So 35 have been out. It's awesome that this is all coming out on time.
Yeah, you and I are kind of thinking along the same lines here. This is unprecedented. I was at the EPA during the Recovery Act years, the kind of foundations of the Diesel Emission Reduction Act, and working through those programs, and that was an incredibly fast burn. But you were talking about $300 million.
Exactly.
This is $5 billion. I mean, this is it's a totally different paradigm. But you're right. This is moving as quickly and efficiently as I've seen. Now, there will be a difference between a plan and a project. When we start talking about shovel-ready stuff, that'll be a little different. So we'll see how the states manage the considerations there. But you're right. This is Federal Highway Administration and DOT are incredibly motivated here to move forward.
Now, I know I'm sure you've answered this a lot, but can you just talk about the timeline for disbursement of the funds and deadline for applications?
Yeah. So once these approval letters all come through and every state has their approved plan, it will be out of the Federal Highway Administration's hands, and now moves down to the state level for individual implementation. Each state is going to have their own timeline and approach, and it's going to take into consideration, who the partners are, if the utilities are going to be part of the selection process, who and how many at the state level DOTs are going to be involved. There's just a bunch of nuance that will manifest itself in these different timing considerations. Generally, what we're seeing right now is the first rounds of funding to open for application in Q4 of this year. So, I'm kind of looking at November, December sort of thing.
Okay.
And then, some states will move a little bit slower than that. And slow isn't bad. It's just that, if there's more highways in a state, it just may take more time. But we're generally seeing most states to open up funding opportunities, in this coming quarter, or for sure by Q1 of 2023, which is quick. I mean, that's in the funding world. 6 months goes by in the blink of an eye, and so that this is not slow money by any stretch of the imagination.
Are you getting a lot of calls? Are people ready?
We are, and it's one of those conversations to have. It's like, well, we got to talk about brass tack. It's not kind of, we're past the sort of general approach anymore. We're really down granularly at site level discussions, because the NEVI funding is designed. There's certain parameters around mileage and intervals, as well as mileage off the dedicated highways. There's certain routes that are eligible and certain ones that are not. And so you have to put all those considerations together. And so if you think about, the retailers, there are a lot of people getting really good at geographic information systems right now, trying to find, which site is eligible, where do I place it? If I can buy new real estate, could I get that new site funded? There's a lot of that maneuvering going on right now as you get ready for these programs.
I know one question we get a lot in office is where they can find each state's plans.
Sure. Yeah. Federal Highway Administration has done a tremendous job with transparency around this whole process. Mm-hmm. There is a dedicated National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program website that is not only listing the individual states and what their plans are, but the approval letters and any documentation that goes into that. So they've done a really nice job of being transparent and upfront with that information, and to the extent that they're like giving federal DOT contact names out to people. And it's like, hey, if you have a question, reach out. That's not something they have done much in the past. So that level of communication with the public and with the states is tremendous to see.
What is the website? Did you already?
It's long with a bunch of names. I can, perhaps we can post it in the notes for the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of dive into the state plans. Was there similarities, differences? Which states are good?
Yeah. I wish I could say there was some general approach that, was kind of like high level, here's how to do it. But there isn't. Every state is really taking their own kind of unique element to it, from publishing their own parameters on, like, if you apply and, your scoring criteria, you get 10 points if you're in this area, you get 15 points if you're in this area, whether or not the state is calculating emissions reductions as part of that process. There's all sorts of different strategies. One of the, as a Louisiana native, I'm certainly interested in following what Louisiana DOTD is doing and their efforts. And they're doing a very unique program in which it's a partnership between the state DOT and the local utilities. There's 4 or 5 utilities here that have electric jurisdiction. And because of some of the climate change impacts that we've been experiencing with floods and hurricanes and things like that, they're prioritizing certain things that other states may not. And so for things like areas near flood-prone zones or low-income communities, those are going to be a big focus for our state. And looking at how the NEVI funds can offset or support or improve some of those opportunities. The role of the utility is going to be really important to watch here. Utilities historically are not necessarily quick moving entities. And so dealing with a utility and having them as a partner in some of these cases, rather than just your utility, having them as a project partner, that could have implications on the overall project schedule. So it's really important to understand, who all the players are in each of these individual state plans, and they're all public. That you can't get approval for your state plan without identifying all the partners. So those 35 states have certainly done that. But it's really important to understand what those implications are, who the partners are going to be, how the money will flow down. If it flows directly from the state DOT to that applicant, or if you need a nonprofit sponsor, or if you have to partner with the utility. All of those things are going to be different sort of machinations as the money flows out.
Okay.
Joe, is the application pretty much the same for any, say, a truck stop operator in Louisiana wanted to apply for this grant? Would the application process be similar at the beginning and maybe take a different flow after that, or are there no similarities whatsoever?
For right now, it's going to be hard to say. Now, there are certain things that all applications will have to include. It's the relevance to the geography. You have to make sure you're on a designated corridor. There's a benefit to low-income communities. There's environmental justice implications. All of those things are mandated by the federal DOT program. So every application will have to address those. Beyond that, you'll see states do their own thing. A lot of what the funding plans have pushed out so far is a lot of focus on criteria categories, in the sense that it's is it existing charging infrastructure? Is it a mobility? And then if depending on one of those, so for existing charging infrastructure, for example, if you're going to put in new chargers, the scoring criteria are going to be, how many chargers you're going to put in, what's the distance between the next closest charging station, is there what the distance to the alternative fuel corridor is, how easy is access and egress, is it, does it allow for mobility inclusions, is it an equitably built site, are there retail, like showers in a store, is there benefit for the consumer at the site? All of those things will flow into the criteria, but the different weighting will depend at the state level, will be justified by the individual states.
Do you know, are they doing environmental site assessments because it's federal funding, or is that not something that's part of the grant process?
We haven't seen it yet. The states may come in and do that kind of stuff, but right now we're not seeing that the site assessments are part of the funding here.
Okay, so I know that the funding will cover 5 years. Is there an urgency to apply now or wait until you're ready? Do you guys have recommendations on that?
I can offer no other recommendation than to move as quickly as your company can. It's a global statement, and I hate kind of being that sort of black and white with the response here, but this is an unprecedented opportunity, and yeah. I don't, reluctance and patience may not be the way to do this. We're seeing a tremendous amount of momentum, and that momentum is backed up by a lot of funding. Now, this $5 billion is locked in. It's guaranteed cash, which is good, but we've already understood that DOT is expressing an interest to front load the funds.
Okay.
To bring more money up sooner.
Yeah.
And because of that, a slow play may put yourself at risk.
Okay. If you have multiple locations in different states, what's the likelihood that you could get a NEVI grant in each of those states?
It's likely. The states are not going to coordinate to say, "Oh, we're funding this company here, you can't fund them there." There's not going to be that type of coordination to preclude applicants across multiple states. We're going to see, retailers, the fuel retails and the highway stores. We'll see, the oil majors, which are energy services groups now, are going to be competing for money in individual states. I do see it as likely, Ginger. I think it's a fair question to flag as a risk for some of these guys who have multiple operations across states. but it's not something that, applying and winning in one is going to lock you out from applying and winning in another. There are other programs that do that, but when you're monitoring at the state level like this, or when the funds are being programmed at the state level like this, that type of interstate communication is not likely.
How long did you, or do we even know, some of these states that are opening up the application process, how long they'll leave the application process open? Are we talking like a quarter, 2 quarters?
Yeah, for federal programming, it's typically 30 to 45 days. So because these funds are generated from the federal DOT level, they'll probably follow that paradigm. It's my hope that these states publish draft RFPs and requests for comment prior to publishing the actual application to stimulate more of that coordination with the public. That may not happen because they've already had to do that to get to these approval letters. So, if I'm banking on schedules, it's 30 to 45 days. That's pretty traditional for these style programs.
Is there anything that, if somebody's interested in applying for these grants, what they could be doing right now before any of this opens up? Is there anything they could be doing and getting ready for?
The state plans that we've seen and had the ones that have been published, and we've seen the draft ones as well. Those are also individual states have their own sort of NEVI website, and so the draft plans are up there as well. But all of the approved plans and the draft ones that we've reviewed have indications of how applications are going to be structured and scoring criteria would be prioritized. So to the immediate next step for any applicant who's looking at NEVI funding is go digest that state level plan, understand what it is that they're wanting to see out of their applicants, where physically the sites have to be. You may find that in a certain state that, you're on a corridor, but if it's not a designated alternative fuel corridor yet, you're out of luck. You won't be able to participate because that site isn't yet on an eligible alternative fuel corridor. Now, Federal Highway Administration may designate that corridor next year, and then you become eligible for money, which is great. But for right now, for this first round, you wouldn't be able to go secure it. That's just kind of one example of going through and digesting these plans to understand the ramifications of what that state's looking for and how they're gonna fund it.
And you were mentioning partnerships earlier, so you have to have so much percentage financial partnership with these grants, or what?
Cost share, yeah, for sure. I mean, the cost share implications are kind of how the state level DOTs will measure the amount of leverage, basically how far you're stretching the state's funds. And if you come in with a request for the minimum cost share, that's fine. That's eligible. You can do that. But I've always been of the mind that if you can push and leverage those dollars, stretch them a little bit further, you're going to have a more competitive, more feasible project for the state to fund. You're not putting as much risk on the state's shoulders. And those typically are more appealing than just ones that requesting minimum cost share.
Ginger, those were good questions. Are you done?
Sure. I'm just thinking of those folks who are like waiting for this to happen, but as they're waiting, like what are the things that could be getting done now? Because as Joe's mentioning, right, this is going to go fast. I mean, 30, 45 days. And if they're coming out in Q4, we've got, holiday stuff happening, you might want to get a leg up on whatever you can at this point.
I would highly encourage applicants to take a look at what may be required from data collection and reporting. This is not a handout. This is not a charity. This is going to be a grant award that's a contractual obligation for this applicant to take certain efforts in return for funding from the state. And those efforts are delineated in each of these state plans. And so it's really important to understand, like there's real-time reporting requirements for some of this stuff. So ADA accessibility, internet, and that kind of thing is going to be required. And there's also quarterly and annual reports. These are administrative burdens that applicants may not be aware of. And while the money is great and opportunistic and super exciting, there is a cost to this, not only in terms of the application itself, but the post-award implementation. There will be an administrative cost to ensuring that these funds are, stay in compliance.
Are those an annual report they have to submit, or you said quarterly? It'll
depend on the state. Traditionally, it's quarterly. For some of the, for quarterly data, it's going to be things like, number of kilowatt hours consumed, or number of ports in operation, what the uptime is. For annual things, it's probably more narrative-based, lessons learned, kind of what's next. That's traditionally how they'll structure these.
Seems like a good time to ask how people can get a hold of you, Joe.
Sure. I mean, we'll publish the contact information, of course, with the the publication of the podcast. But you can reach me at joe.annotti@gladstein.org or 310-525-0469. Happy to give me a shout and discuss some of the strategy opportunities here.
Okay. Now, before you go, I like to ask my surprise questions. These are just fun.
Oh, good.
Okay. Okay. These are just fun questions that are truck stop related. What is your go-to on the road snack?
Rye chips.
Okay. Now, we usually ask if you're stuck in a snowstorm in a truck stop, how do you pass the time? But since you're in Louisiana, this might not work. Hurricane?
Yeah, don't get much snow here. Yeah, it did snow the Christmas after Hurricane Katrina. It snowed, so that year felt a little bit like apocalyptic. That was a long year. But if I'm stranded in a truck stop, boy, make some friends, watch some movies. Maybe convince one of the truckers to pull a sled out and haul me around the parking lot.
Oh, that was a good one. We haven't had that one. Okay, do you prefer to ride or drive?
Drive.
Okay. And how do you take your truck stop coffee?
Black. Black as sin.
Okay, and we always end with our controversial question, which it truly isn't controversial. But is it truck stop, travel center, or travel plaza?
It's whatever has the best coffee. There's my political, non-controversial answer.
Okay. Like I said at the beginning, we have a lot of resources that we've worked on with GNA, and so I'll be sure to include links to all that in the podcast. And thank you again for giving us your time and knowledge this morning, Joe.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Ginger.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Truck Stops Here. You can find us online at natso.com/podcast. If you have any questions or more questions for Joe, please reach out to me at editor@natso.com. Bye, guys.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by NATSO, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by NATSO in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.